What if I told you that long before Courtney Dauwalter had us all questioning whether men are actually better distance runners than women, there was another woman doing the exact same thing. Someone who still holds multiple course records, who GU energy gels were invented to help beat, and in that race she still won by almost 8 hours. Okay, that's a bit, or maybe entirely, an embellishment, but it cannot be overstated how great she was. But with that greatness, injury and age took their toll, and until recently, she even refused interviews to speak on the sport that she changed so much. It was with her influence that we went from a sport where women could merely also join into a sport where women could thrive. And we see that legacy today in some of the incredible women who participate in our sport, like Courtney. Now, I've got beef with the term GOAT. I think it's horrendously overused mostly. Like, there can't be this many goats, David Roach. This isn't a farm. Or maybe it is. I don't really know where you live. Also, everybody thinks they know the GOAT when they see them. But they don't, at least not in my opinion, because usually they're not talking about Ann Trason. Let's dig into the story of the absolute GOAT of trail and ultramarathon running, the story of 14-time Western States 100 champion, Ann Trason. Born August 30th, 1960 in Auburn, California, Ann began running in middle school. She states that her father took her to a girls' track team because at the time, there weren't a lot of sports for girls to be involved in. Title IX was passed in 1972, so this would have been around that time when women's sports were actually becoming a thing. It might be hard for someone like me, or maybe you, if you, like me, have only lived in a post-Title IX world, but there was a time not so long ago when women just flat out weren't allowed to participate in sports. Ann says that she needed to get the energy out when she was a kid, and that's why her father put her on the track team. She later ran a sub 6-minute mile at just 11 years old, so clearly she was getting that energy out. Later on, Ann attended Pacific Grove High School in California's Monterey Peninsula, running the second best 2-mile time in the nation at 9 minutes 58 seconds and earning high school All-American honors with a 35-minute 11-second 10K. But now, tell me if you've heard this one before. A gifted runner in high school, she struggled with injury in college and actually lost her scholarship to the University of New Mexico. I can't find much in terms of detail specifically on this injury outside of the fact that it was a knee injury, so I don't want to speculate on why this might have occurred or what effect this might have had later on down the road. Nevertheless, she kept running and competed in her first ultra at age 20 in 1981, the American River 50. She states that she was inspired by Sally Edwards, and at the time, she couldn't believe that anyone could run 50 miles. Tell me if you've heard that one before too. It's always interesting to see just how much your average ultra runner often has in common with the elite runners in how they entered the sport, who inspired them, or DNFing in an initial race or two, and the steep learning curve of competing in ultramarathon races. Even the old-timers now had their old-timers back in the day. And that's kind of how it's been always across human history, and it's really interesting to me that a figure so legendary to me like Ann Trason would have her own legendary older figure to look up to. The American River 50 that she did compete in did not go well. She stated previously that she didn't realize that she would need to eat and drink outside of aid stations at the race. Think about just how different the sport has become today. Handhelds and hydration vests were unheard of. We now live in a time in which more people have a harder time choosing what exactly to do for race day nutrition, a time when every podcast and live show and forum post are inundated with questions like what kind of diet and what kind of gel and water bottles, or maybe solid food, or maybe a hydration bladder. And you can find anybody telling you to do literally any stupid thing on social media, us included. But imagine for a moment a world in which there are no handhelds, no gels, basically no sports drinks. I mean, Gatorade came in a glass bottle back then, and it might not have even been distributed in California yet. Today, we have too much information, frankly, but then there was none, and people just went for it, and often ran faster than we do today. The race not having gone well definitely had an effect on Trason. For 2 years after this first race, she didn't enter another ultra. But a 30-mile run with a friend on the Western States course changed her outlook on this. And now, if you've never been to Western States and only followed the media coverage from home, I think it's easy to think of that race only in terms of the downhills, the canyons, running down Main Street in Forest Hill, or maybe the Rucky Chucky River crossing. I know I did before I went there. But this first section of the course is truly stunning, beginning in the Olympic Valley at 6,200 feet above sea level, climbing up over Emigrant Pass at 87,500 feet, passing through the Granite Chief Wilderness, with its stunning views of pine-covered, glacier-carved valleys, red fir forests, mountain meadows, and dusty granite formations unique to the area. This place is truly unique and special, and if you haven't seen it, it is more than worth the trip just for the history and inspiration alone. For Ann, that inspiration eventually led her to the start line of Western States in 1987 and 1988, 2 races she would actually DNF. It's hard to find info on these DNFs except that she didn't finish these races. Maybe the late 80s weren't as friendly or as ready for navel-gazy, multi-paragraph long Strava captions about our grandest fears in life and just how many excuses we have about why race day didn't go the way it was supposed to. Or maybe back then sometimes it just wasn't your day and you moved on. What we do know, however, is that many of our greatest ultra runners have DNF'd their first 100. And I'm not just talking about John Dolabacki III. Courtney Dauwalter as well DNF'd her first attempt at a 100-miler. But I introduced Ann Trason in this video as the 14-time Western States 100 champion. Maybe just winning something 14 times and setting what were then course records in absolutely improbable performances makes 2 DNFs and the learning curve associated with them just feel a bit pointless to publish something and dwell on and think about so hard. And maybe there's something that we can all take away from that. At the same time, we shouldn't focus solely on our success at Western States 100 either, because by the time of those DNFs, Trason was already the winner of the Leadville 100, the American River 50, in the IAU 100K championships when it had been held in Spain. Trason was a force to be reckoned with, almost irrespective of race distance or course. To focus on something like 2 DNFs in a retrospective of a career as incredible as hers was, seems frankly a bit pessimistic and not really thoughtful or purposeful. But with that first win at the 1989 Western States 100, Trason truly began her era of utter dominance in the sport, one that included world records, world championships, and, as I alluded to in the intro to this video, the invention of goo. Now, I said that goo was invented to beat her, but that's not entirely true. Or even true a little bit, probably. And goo definitely doesn't have that on the About Us section of their website that I was reading. But I do know that Dr. Bill Vaughn was looking to give his daughter Laura an edge in the races she was running, and one of those races just so happened to be the Western States 100. And this year where goo debuted at the Western States 100 just happened to be a year where Ann Trason won the race really handily. Later, ultra endurance in Central California being a relatively small scene, Vaughn and Trason were actually neighbors, and she became involved in the development process of goo. Ann herself stated, "He lived just down the street. I would jog down to his house and he would be making new gel flavors in his Cuisinart. I would eat one and then go running to see if it would make me puke. It was a fun process." So personally, I can kind of imagine that being a fun process, but the act of vomiting is never fun. And just the risk inherent in that, to me, feels very strange and not something that Wesley and I are going to start doing anytime soon, probably. More than just the flavors, though, it was Trason's experience that cemented 2 parts of the goo brand that are really well known today. See, in the 90s, goo would basically come in the equivalent of a tubular sealed Ziploc bag, which, if you can't imagine it, wouldn't be the best for actually eating or carrying on the go. So the pair later developed the earliest form of the packaging we all recognize today for one of Ann's World Championship 100K races. Even though today goo's popularity in our market that is just incredibly saturated with different running energy products is different, despite the fact that it's a Kleenex-like brand where people refer to all gels as goose. Even they refer to the spring gels that I pay way too much money for, or those Huma gels that allegedly, so I don't get sued like Pat McAfee did, taste like gravel and weird chia-like lumps, and it's just not even digestible. Who likes those? Why are they at aid stations? Can somebody please explain this to me? Who is picking those?
A few moments later.
Anyways, we live in a different world, but every race you've ever done, every single one, I bet, at that race, there was some kind of energy gel at the aid station, And even if they were awful, even if you didn't eat them, even if they scare you off, even if you think that they're going to nuke your little tummy, this is a part of Ann Trason's legacy, that there are energy gels at every running store, at every aid station, at every race, all across the country. And she played a big role in the development of those. A lot of Ann's success she attributes to problem solving in the moment. What I think I excelled at was staying in the moment and really thinking about my body and problem solving. To be a really good ultra runner, you have to be thinking all the time and working with the course and working with yourself. Now, a lot has been made about her run at Leadville with the Raramuri natives in 1994. And I won't get into it now, but please let us know in the comments if you'd like me to. Just all the oh so many problems with the book Born to Run, both in how it represents the Raramuri people and its very ill-informed understanding of human evolution, or even the multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Vibram and the related thousands of Achilles injuries that book spawned. How this relates to Ann Trason, I think, is better put in her own words from a Runner's World article on her career. The press made more out of the races than I ever did. I didn't think about anyone else while racing, no matter what's been written about me. I was competing against Ann. I was embarrassed and shy. Everyone talks about how I came in second overall at Leadville, but the thing that really bugged me was that I didn't break 18 hours. That's all I cared about. But hey, if you want to write about Tarahumaras and whatever else, go ahead. When I got to the last aid station, I knew I wasn't going to break 18 hours, and that broke my heart. Not a very interesting story. It's kind of boring, but that's the reality. All that said, during that year's Leadville 100, she set a course record that only Claire Gallagher has come within an hour of. The pinnacle of Trason's excellence seems to come with her wins at the Double in 1996 and 1997. The Double at the time referred to winning both Western States and Comrades in the same year, what in the 90s were the most competitive road ultra and trail ultra in the world. They were also just 12 days apart and on different continents. Now, people assure me that planes were different in the 90s and that flying was more of an experience and less of like a Greyhound that fucks you across the sky. But even the mere idea of getting on an airplane 12 days after finishing Western States, going through customs, the international immigration process that our modern security world entails. I think if I finished 100 and somebody has to see my passport within 6 months of it, I would probably have a mental breakdown. In 2 years in a row, Ann Trason traveled internationally. She took no rest, essentially, and won the 2 single most competitive races in our sport, back-to-back, in almost back-to-back weeks. Today, this excellence still seems kind of unheard of. And even though the 2 races that constitute our double are now very different with Western States and UTMB, or maybe Western States and Hard Rock, or Hard Rock and UTMB, it's just different. The amount of time is different, the fact that they're both mountain races is different, and also the fact that nobody's winning both of them. Even some of our modern day greats like Francois Dehaene are not winning both of them. Ann Trason did it, and she did it twice, with less time between races. Further, she won all 27 of her 100-mile races prior to transitioning away from the competitive side of the sport. And we'll begin discussing that transition now. So she has a retirement of sorts that began in 2004, and this revealed that she had a torn ACL, and had that torn ACL for nearly 10 years, while competing at the highest level of any athlete in the world at the time. Around this time as well of her retirement, she seemed to disappear a bit, refusing interviews, avoiding races, and withdrawing from the community her excellence had helped to form during its halcyon days. Not being able to run at an elite level was too painful. Too much had changed, and she was also going through a difficult time in a relationship that she was in. But in 2013, at 53 years old, she returned to the sport, participating in several 100-milers even still. And she said later, "I may not be able to compete, but those bonds, they don't break." And you can see her at races today. As recently as 2019, at least according to UltraSign Up, she was still competing on the track in timed races. To put into perspective what it would be like to share the track or trails with Trason, I go to a quote from Sarah Lavender Smith, who herself is a very influential figure in women's ultra running. In a blog post some years ago, Sarah said that seeing Ann out there still competing would be like if you were a new swimmer and you could go down to the Y only to see Michael Phelps in the lane next to you. Or Yuli Steck, rest in peace, at your local climbing gym after you bought your first pair of climbing shoes. This is what it means to still have a figure like Ann in our sport, still out there at these events competing and being a part of the community. Accomplishments are only ever part of the story, but I'll be listing them here. Ann was 65th on Sports Illustrated's list of the 100 greatest female athletes of the 20th century, a 12-time Ultra Runner of the Year, the Runner's World 1995 American Female Runner of the Year, a 6-time USATF Ruth Anderson Ultra Runner of the Year, and an Ultra Running Hall of Fame member in 2020. We'll be signing off with her advice for other ultra runners, given in a Runner's World article from 2015. Have patience. For a lot of people, it takes years. Give yourself time and enjoy. Not all the rewards are going to happen the first season. Follow your passion.